Hey everyone, welcome to the Be Insightful in Technology podcast. I'm your host Shakira, and we have Dennis O'Shea here who's going to talk about what he does and more about his journey along the way. We're going to go ahead and get started on the podcast. So, Dennis, tell us about who you are and what do you do and where can people find you if you have any social medias that you can link and I can add into the show notes.
Let me start with that. I'm a bit of a Neanderthal when it comes to social media. I'm not on any social media platforms other than LinkedIn. So you won't find me on Instagram or Facebook, but LinkedIn, purely for business purposes.
Mhm.
But a little bit about me. I grew up in Ireland, and when I finished my university studies, I moved to Finland, and then I moved to New Zealand later on, and then I moved to Switzerland. My kids were born there, and then I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, about 7 years ago. So I'm a global citizen. My wife was born in Australia. My kids are born in Switzerland. Um, and I work in IT. I've built a global business and I've lots of fun doing what I do and like sharing and teaching.
Being able to travel around is something that a lot of us don't really do all the time, especially when we talk about like our audience, high school to college. They were pretty much there during the COVID times where they're in this transitional period of, hey, I'm about to be an adult and now we have to all stay at home, right? So
That was so tough. I've got three kids who are young adults between 18 and 23. And, I really feel bad for that generation because they didn't get to travel in the way my generation got to travel when we were young and restless and we wanted to just get out and travel. And I really feel bad for the kids of this generation who were grounded for like almost 3 years.
yeah. And it's exciting to go out and experience new things, even
Yeah.
if it's outside of your home,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
even if it's down the street, because the whole time period of COVID being in school and then having to go straight remote, like I was able to graduate high school right before the pandemic, like the year before the pandemic was.
Good
Is
for
I
you.
had a I had a normal school year, but right
Yeah.
after that, it seemed almost people spent their whole high school at home at that
Yeah.
point. You became
Yeah.
online students.
Yeah.
It took away from a great experience. But
Yeah.
things are transitioning back to normal. And those who are like, had that high school pandemic experience are shifting out of their college pandemic experience, as in they're getting out there, they're going to explore new things, they're even taking the chances to study abroad. So out of like your favorite places, like can you list them from where you've been?
My favorite places. Oh my
Mhm.
God, so many. Look, Switzerland is heaven on earth. It is a
Mhm.
truly extraordinary place. We were only there 3 years, and I feel like I've got unfinished business in Switzerland. New Zealand is unbelievable. I moved there on a for 9 months on a work contract. I stayed for 25 years because it's just an amazing place, and I met my wife
Wow.
there. And then my entire family moved from Ireland to New Zealand to live there because it's so amazing. I mentioned Finland. Wow, Scandinavia and Finland, so beautiful, so beautiful, so amazing. Um, and now I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which has got the best energy of any place I've ever lived. The most
Mm.
wonderful intersection of high tech and creativity. It's
Oh,
truly
wow.
extraordinary. The energy in this town is like nothing I've ever seen before. The creativity, the positivity, how people are so kind. It's just an amazing community. So I've been very lucky, extremely lucky to be able to live in the places I've lived. And I'm not done yet. There's other cool places I want to go and spend time in.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned like you're not done yet. And one thing that I'm taking a road trip for like my birthday. I'm coming up to Nashville. I'm gonna go to Nashville for a bit and then I'm gonna go to South Carolina, do some
Awesome.
things out
I
there. So
can
I'm gonna drive
I can
around.
give you some cliff notes on where to go.
Yeah, I definitely need some like good restaurants, just some fun
Yeah.
activities and things like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, mentioning that, you're not done yet is one of those key things, like that mentality of it doesn't matter how old you get, you could still go wherever you want, stay for however long you
Yeah.
want. It's
And that's
kind
the
of
whole growth mindset. It's this idea that I don't know how to do this thing yet, but I can figure it out. I don't know how to play pickleball yet, but I'm figuring it out. I haven't figured out how to master AI yet and use it in my work, but I will. And that's the growth mindset we try and develop. And, and everybody we work with, we can figure these things out. We ask
Mhm.
enough questions and we listen to the people who know and we give things a go. We can figure anything out.
Oh, yes, yes. Like we talk a lot about there having a growth mindset on the podcast. So I'm glad that you brought that up. So let's kind of travel back into like the start of your tech journey and how you've basically gathered that growth mindset, whether you've always had it or just, you know, learned to change along the way. Like, how did you find your passion? Let's talk about your journey.
Oh, that's a good question. I thought I was going to be passionate about engineering, so I did engineering. I did a bachelor's degree, I did a master's degree. I got into working for Nokia. Some of your audience won't even know that word. They were an amazing cell phone company. Once upon a time, they dominated the cell phone business. They're gone now, pretty much, and now it's all Apple and Samsung. But Nokia was the world leader in the cell phone business, and I worked for them in Finland in the lab doing some research for about 3 years. And I realized I wasn't a great engineer. And I kind of slowly started to figure out that I probably should do something else. And they offered me this opportunity to go to New Zealand to help build the world's first cellular network. That was back in 92. So I went out to New Zealand on this 9-month contract. And as I said before, I fell in love with the country and this woman who became my wife. And I stayed for 25 years. Um, but I got out of engineering and I got into project management and account management and sales. And after 15 years of that, I left that company and I set up my own company because I could see a problem. The problem I could see was that people are buying smartphones and spending up to $1,000 on this amazing technology, but all they were doing with it was sending text messages and making phone calls. And this was before we had social media and before we had Spotify and Instagram and all that. And it was much harder to set up email on a smartphone, much harder to set up music, much harder to sync your calendar, browse the net and the web and all that. So I set up a business called Mobile Mentor. And the whole goal was to try and help one person at a time to set up their smartphone to be a really productive tool. And so I was targeting business people who were just too busy to read the manual, too busy to try and figure it out, and just help them get everything working. And this was 20 years ago, right? When it was really hard work. It was really hard work to get a smartphone properly working. You probably can't even imagine that now because it's so simple. You just hold your new phone on top of your old phone and boom, it all happens. But 20 years ago, it was a colossal pain in the butt to try and get your phone set up and transfer your contacts from your old one and put in your server addresses to get emails coming in and all that. So I set up this business to help one person at a time to get their smartphone fully working. And I scaled that to do that for 1 million people in New Zealand, Australia, Brazil, China, Switzerland, the UK, Japan. We scaled that business by getting really, really good at helping each individual person set up their smartphone to be productive. And that's kind of where I got started.
Okay. Okay, so now where are you at currently? You're still working on helping people set up their technology to
No.
be productive?
No,
No.
not at all. Because, after a few years of that, we realized that the problem we set out to solve had been solved by the technology. Apple and Android. There are ways of doing this setup, make it super easy now. So the need for our service disappeared after a while. We saw that coming, fortunately. So we shifted. We did the first pivot in the business, and that was to get away from kind of being a training provider and helping set up phones to becoming a managed services company. So we started working with banks and airlines and large companies who had 1,000 or 2,000 mobile devices, and we helped them to manage all those devices because those devices need to be secure and they need to manage the cost. They've got all these assets they need to keep track of. And then the end users need support in setting them up and all that. So we became a managed service provider in a classic IT managed service company,
Mhm.
but specifically for mobile devices. And we started with something called the BlackBerry, which again is probably before your time. But it was the BlackBerry and then the iPhone and then the Android and blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, all the work we do is with laptops and tablets and smartphones and using Microsoft technology. So Microsoft 365 now is the productivity suite that runs on every device. You can have all the Microsoft applications on Macs, iPads, Android,
Mhm.
iPhones, Windows, all the rest of it. And what we do today is we are a Microsoft global partner, and we help Microsoft customers get all their devices secure and keep them secure so that their employees can work anywhere, like work in your home or work at your grandmother's place or work at on vacation, wherever, on any device and be productive and secure. So that's the intersection we work in, keeping people secure and productive using Microsoft technology.
Oh, okay. So let me ask from a product standpoint, is it better to set this stuff up on Androids when it comes to mobile devices, or is it iPhones? Because for one, our audience has the debate still going on with the iPhones and Androids. Personally, I'm a Androids are better type of person, but when it comes for like a business and you want to be able to understand how your employees are going to utilize the devices, when it comes to like what's the best for security purposes, like what's the best platform to actually secure a device and provide functionality the best to your employees.
It depends on the industry. So if you are in the healthcare industry, iOS is dominant.
Mm,
So
okay.
most nurses and most hospitals using iOS devices, iPads or iPhones. If you are in retail, almost all the big box retailers we work with using Android. So like if you're in Joanne stores or Ross stores or Kohl's or whatever, they will have tens of thousands of Android devices for the front of house and the back of house and the logistics and the inventory management, because Android is super flexible and you can customize it. Um, but we generally see iOS for security, Android for flexibility.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that because for our audience that is able to work currently, if you're in the United States, typically above that 16-year mark, you're working in places, like retail places, and you
Yeah,
notice like what type of devices that they're using. That could be like your pique your interest.
yeah,
That can definitely travel into something else. Like I know when I worked for Walmart, we use like these Zebra phones. Pretty much they're more on like an Android platform,
yeah, yeah. Zebra is
but
on, it's
yeah.
built on the Android platform.
Mhm.
You got it. Yeah,
And it was just interesting to me of like how all of these devices are connected. And I'm a networking person, so I'm just like, where are they going? Like all this traffic that's flowing through
yeah.
them, like the fact that people are able to, scan something, purchase something, what happens here. So that's one of the things that we don't think about, even though we have access to this stuff at a young age, we can see how it, works on the other end.
True,
So
true. And that's where my career started, was designing that technology in the lab, literally trying to figure out how we get this technology working. So for me, it's been an extraordinary journey going from the lab right out into industry and helping people use the technology and then scale it up and see that happen around the world.
okay, so when it does come to from the lab to production, can you talk about the steps that happens during that process? Like what are some things that businesses take into account within that life cycle?
Of taking a technology from the lab to production.
Yes.
It has changed a lot over the years, but nowadays, it's all happening at very high speed through a framework called Agile, typically an Agile framework, which means that you build a backlog of all the work that needs to be done. So you've got a huge list of all the things that need to be done. And then you break the work up into sprints, and a sprint might be 1 week or 2 weeks of work. And you figure out what are going to be the highest value things for us to do in the next couple of weeks. And the whole team is working on those things. And then you do a review to say, okay, did we get that piece of the code working or that part of the solution working? And what's the highest value thing for us to do in the next 2 weeks? And you're coming up for air every 2 weeks to see how are we doing? What are we going to focus on next? And the whole team working on that through a series of sprints. And that's typically how new software products or new hardware products or new innovations are brought to market. Um, Teams working in an agile fashion.
Okay. And for like our audience, if you want to be on the project management side, when you have to learn more about this agile process and the different like just functions of different ways to proceed with just getting a project completed.
Yes, and I'm really glad you mentioned that. It's a different project management methodology. So the classic way of managing a project was you plan what are the dependencies, and we need to do this before we do that, and we're looking 3, 6, 9, 12 months out. With the agile framework, there's a different function called the Scrum Master, and it's the way you bring people together to figure out what got done, what can we take off the list, what are we going to do the next couple of weeks, and facilitating a very different style of project management. That's a terrific skill. The people who learn that skill and can facilitate an agile project and run that and manage it and deliver good results, oh my God, that's a great skill to have.
And I'm learning that too. He is not wrong. Sometimes it makes all the difference when you have a good and great project manager. Like if you're going into being an engineer and you're going to be a part of a team and there's going to be a project manager there, a great project manager will keep the team on track, connect you with who you need to be connected with, and it just shows. It shows. It is very evident when there is not a great one. Is also it takes a lot of initiative on your part, everyone else's part. Some things get lost in the cracks because that's not the only thing people are working on sometimes. So hey, if you're interested in being a project manager, I strongly suggest looking into that skill of being a
Yeah,
scrum master.
yeah.
So let's talk about your thoughts, comments, and concerns. So this right here can be more specifically on what you're doing. I know you partnered with Microsoft currently, so we can talk about that. What have you been currently working on that has allowed you to work essentially express your passion more or be able to shift the industry in the ways that you kind of never imagined?
Oh, I'll tell you what I do with a lot of my day-to-day work. I'm talking to customers. Microsoft introduces me to some of their customers, generally large enterprises, and they want to figure out how to get more value from their investment in Microsoft licenses. Because some of them are spending millions and millions or tens of millions of dollars in Microsoft licenses, and they want to figure out how to do more with it. So we've got a process where we do an assessment, and we ask them about 120 questions to understand what they're doing with the technology, how they're using it. We'll take that away, we'll analyze the information, compare it to other organizations, and then we'll come back to the client and we'll show them what their maturity is today, show them how they compare to others. That's always fun. But most importantly, we build out a roadmap and we show them a plan of what they could do based on today's reality, based on their starting point today. So it's all about getting a really good, honest understanding of what are their current challenges and the current situation, and building out a plan from there. And providing them some guidance and advice and thought leadership on what they could do and where they can get more value for money and where they can be more secure and make their employees more productive. And that's the area where we shine, helping them do that, be more secure, be more productive, get more value for money. And that's so much fun. I love doing that. I do a couple of those every day with different clients. And honestly, it gives me energy.
What
Absolutely.
is what are some of the top things that companies kind of underutilize that would actually set them forward when it comes to these productivity tools?
Um, Look, one of the things we end up talking about a lot is going passwordless.
Mm.
So many organizations require their employees to manage many, many, many passwords. And we're big advocates for going passwordless, getting away from passwords completely and using biometrics and MFA, multi-factor authentication, and some other technologies so that we're not typing any passwords. And then we're a lot more secure, we're more productive because we can just sign in faster with our faces or our fingerprints, and we're more secure and we're less likely to get hacked. And the way I tend to explain it is, passwords were a great invention back in 1961. 1961. That was a hell of a long time ago. How many technologies from the 1960s are we still using today? None, right? We've killed the fax machine and we've killed the telex and pretty much killed the landline phone and all those dinosaur technologies, but we're still typing passwords. What's that about? And so we're trying to encourage all our clients, get rid of the passwords, trust the biometrics, trust the multi-factor authentication and all the other components, single sign-on. And because, the number one way hackers get into our companies, our environments today is compromised credentials. They figure out someone's password and they get in and then they can move around and steal our information and compromise us or ransom the company. So that's one good example, going passwordless.
That's honestly a great example, considering that like nowadays, I'm gonna say us Gen Zers love to be able to sign in with face
Yeah,
ID or
yeah,
just
yeah,
fingerprint. And I know that when I have, we all sign up for like a bunch of sites. Like when you work a job, you have like a million
yeah,
applications that you're
yeah.
probably using. So I know for me, they make you come up with these long, extensive passwords that at the end of the day, I swear I cannot remember every one of them. So
Of course you
I'm
can't.
wait, I'm either wasting more time resetting them
Yeah.
after I've created them, or I'm just wasting more time typing it in every single time I access the site. So
So,
passwordless,
Shakira, you're
I,
not alone. There's about 4 billion people with the same problem you've got. Now, I can tell you, I haven't typed a password for maybe 2.5 years because we're passwordless in my business. And that's important to us. And we're paperless. It's the other thing. So many organizations still have lots of printers and spending money on print consumables and paper and all that. And what's the point?
Right.
So
I realized,
passwords are
okay, so
paperless.
paperless is one of those things where we're all about saving the trees, but when you go to a business and you're just filling out information, they always ask, they give you a lot of choice. You have the option now. Like before, it was like it's all paper. Now you have the
Yeah,
option to go paperless. And I know for me, I go paperless every time because I don't even, I'm at the stage where my mailbox, if the only thing that's coming to me to my house is like in my mailbox is trash.
yeah. There you go.
Like
Junk mail,
it's
just
yeah,
trash.
it's
Yes.
junk mail.
Yeah.
So I went to a dealership because I recently bought a car. Went to the dealership for the first time, and everything that I had to sign was electronic. This is
Great.
it was the first time. Normally we will spend hours doing paperwork because all of the thousands of sheets that they have to print out.
Yeah.
And I was just like really, really surprised at, oh, they've upgraded. They have finally upgraded. And now I have a strong appreciation for everything paperless because it's easier for me to go back in my files on my computer and search up like a phrase of something that I may need rather than searching through hundreds of sheets of paper that, are just somewhere lying around. It's just easier. It it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure
so,
is.
so Oh, let me get let me get to this next section. How can others get to where you are, and like what tips you would like to give? This will be about 3 to 5 tips to provide. Like if you were talking to your younger self, giving them advice on like where to go next, how would you make that happen?
Um, I would say get really good at asking questions. Like I've learned so much about the world of technology. And it's not because I watch YouTube videos, not because I've ever read any technology journals or whatever. It's because I ask tons of questions. And I learn just by listening to people. And then I ask them the next question, the next one, the next one. And so I would just say get really good at inquiry, become curious and ask lots of questions because it's just a great way to learn. The second thing I would say is if you want to become an expert in something, I read somewhere a long, long time ago that if you read on something for 10 minutes per day, just 10 minutes per day, you can become an expert in the subject. And I thought, that's BS. That can't be possible. So I tried it and I decided I'd spend 10 minutes every day just on the web researching this one topic and learning about it. And very quickly, I found that I was not an expert, but I knew more than other people about that subject. And that's all it took. So I knew more than others. So I was able to ask better questions and go a bit deeper and then have better conversations and share examples of things I had read or what other people were doing in this particular thing. And the more I talked about it, the more I learned about it, the better I became, and I became an expert. And it was amazing that just that 10 minutes per day was enough. So that's something I want to share. You want to become an expert in something, 10 minutes per day, you'll quickly know more than the average person. So they'll look at you as a bit of an expert and you'll have better conversations and your learning will accelerate.
That's some good advice there.
Yeah. And then I'll share a third thing that I learned from an astronaut in Kennedy Space Station in Florida. I went there with my kids. It was an
Mm.
amazing day. And we had lunch with an astronaut, and my son bought his book. And we got the astronaut to sign the book. And the astronaut was asking my son what he wants to do and all this. And I think my son was like maybe 11 years old at the time. And the astronaut says, you can do anything in life if you learn how to learn. And my son was like, what do you mean? Could I become an astronaut? And the guy says, yes, you could. You could. And he says, the key is learning how to learn and learning how to retain what you learn. So it doesn't just go in one ear and out the other ear and you forget about it. And he said, the way you learn is you absorb something and then you stop and you reflect on it. And the technique he taught us was, he said, read something for like 15, 20 minutes and then stop and close your eyes and reflect on what did I read? What were the key points? What did I get out of it? What are the implications? And then open your eyes and continue on again. But doing that about every 15, 20 minutes to stop and think about, what am I getting out of this? And what are the key points? And it's in those little pauses that the brain figures out how to organize the information in your head, kind of how to put it in folders and how to index it and organize it so you can recall it later when you need it. And I thanked that astronaut because I said, I was 40 years old at the time. I was like, oh my God, nobody ever taught me that shit. Nobody ever told me that. That is so valuable. I said, thank you for teaching me and my family that technique. And I do that now. As you can see from my bookshelf, I like reading. And if I'm sitting down reading something, I will just close my eyes and kind of go, okay, what's this about? What can I take out of it? What does it mean? How do I contextualize it? And suddenly, and slowly, it's not suddenly, it's slowly, it kind of, the information settles into your brain in a way that makes sense and that you can recall it later.
This is some great advice. It's like one of those things where it's like when you hear it, it just sounds simple, but no, it is part of life. Like it is, I can definitely tell when it comes with like school, how they say we're taught to just regurgitate information, but no, like that it's time to actually take some time and mentally understand the stuff
Yeah,
that you're being taught.
yeah, because you can learn it by heart and be able to reproduce it. But if you are not able to figure out how to use it or why it makes sense, then it's useless. When I was in high school in Ireland, it was a classical education. We had to learn about 50 poems by heart every semester. Honestly, it was crazy. And we did that in Latin, Gaelic, French, and English, Latin, French, and I can't remember. There were four languages at the time. And we had to learn all these poems. And it was really hard on the brain, but we learned how to do it and we could recite them. What we didn't learn is how to appreciate poetry
Mm.
and what it really meant and what are the stories that are being told. And I kind of feel like it was all wasted in a way because it was just learning for the sake of reproducing something rather than learning it for the sake of appreciating the art. because poetry is a form of art, right? It's like
Mhm.
Taylor Swift song is a form of art. A really classical poem is a form of art. We didn't get to appreciate that because we were just trying to remember it like a mathematical theorem or
Mhm.
formula.
School days back then sounded interesting.
It was terrible.
All right. I appreciate the advice. And I also thank you for coming on to the podcast. Do you have a motivating and insightful quote to leave our guest off with, or our audience off with?
So do I have a what?
A motivating and insightful quote. So anything that you would like to just a piece of just advice that stuck with you throughout your journey that you would
I
like to
do.
share.
I have one. I have a phrase that I have lived my life by and I share with others. And it's very simple. It says, it's the future we see is the future we get. And it's all about visualizing in our mind's eye the future we want and every day taking small steps towards it.
That is beautiful because if you can't see it, we can't get there.
Exactly. And you need to be able to see it in your mind's eye, the subconscious part of the brain, which is 10 times bigger than the conscious brain that's dealing with the here and now. But if you have this vision in your mind's eye of who you want to be and how you want to show up in the world and the contribution you want to make and how you're going to serve others through your life, then you will subconsciously navigate your way towards it and you'll make it happen.
That is beautiful because you have to be able to see yourself having it in order to get it. So I'm so glad that you came onto the podcast today. And thank you guys for listening to gain some knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to be insightful in technology.